everybody, and welcome to our DMAC Career Discovery event. We are excited to have professionals here with us today in the human services and psychology world with us, and I will introduce them here in a little bit. But our hope is that these events are linking your education and your career interests with professionals right here in Iowa. So thank you all for tuning in today. Before I introduce our professionals, I just would like to say hello. My name is Jill Hoyk, and I work a part of the work-based learning team here at DMAC. So again, thank you. But without further ado, I just kind of want to jump into getting to know our professionals today. First, we have Dr. Derek Hess, and he is the Clinical Director for Psychology and Mental Health Therapy Services for the Department of Justice. And he's in charge of the 6 mental health and disability service facilities. So a very busy man. So thank you for being here with us, Dr. Hess. And then we have Susan Smith. She is the Managing Director for Iowa's Technical Assistance and Behavioral Supports at Woodward Resource Center. So thank you for being here with us today, Susan. And last but not least, we have Talana Holman, and she is the Mental Health Director at the State Training School for Boys. So they all kind of have different entities in what they do. So I'm excited to kind of get to know their path and how they got to where they are today. So that kind of leads me into my first question, and Dr. Hess, we'll start with you. Just kind of, I know I kind of gave a brief introduction about what you do now, but can you talk a little bit about like when you first started to think about this as a career pathway? Is it something that you all kind of stumbled upon, or is it something that you knew you wanted to do from when you were little? And then touch on a little bit of your education too as well.
Sure, thank you. First of all, yeah, again, thank you for having us. No, I did not envision that I would be in the role that I'm in now here in Iowa when I was starting out this educational process. For me, I went to college and ended up double majoring in psychology and political science. So I knew my parents happened to, major in psychology and work in the public sector and human services fields. So conversations about human service related issues and systems, particularly the public sector, such as government entities, was a common occurrence, at the dinner table for us. So when I started, I kind of had interest in that, but I needed through coursework at school, as well as internships, tease it apart and find out exactly what I was most passionate about and probably most skilled to do. And so I started out exploring psychology and political science. And I got to a point where I didn't know if I wanted to go the psychology or mental health route or the law route. And when I was doing an internship with a local district attorney's office in upstate New York, I realized that they have these things called joint programs where I could get a doctorate in clinical psychology and a law degree. And for me, that just made sense because I can obviously see psychology and I can see the law without each other. But my main interest was that intersection of psychology and law. So for me, it was the answer. And I think also it allowed me to delay really figuring out what I wanted to do for several more years. And I think that was important for my journey. And so what I did with that was at that point, I was already majoring in psychology and political science and had done some internships, but I went and engaged in other internships. For instance, I worked at an outpatient sex offender treatment center. And, to make sure that was this psychology, law, kind of criminal justice or forensic arena, the space that I wanted to work. And it was. And then so from there, I applied to graduate programs right after undergrad, was fortunate enough to get into one out on the West Coast in California. And from there, it just kind of took shape. I knew I wanted to be in that space, but I didn't know exactly the type of work that I would do. And so by dabbling in both psychology and the law, I ultimately specialized in forensic psychology, which is the intersection of law and psychology, where you typically, in my case, use psychological science and expertise to help the legal system answer questions that they have. And so that then led me to take, right after graduate school, a mainly academic position. I was the department chair of the forensic psychology department at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, whose main campus is in Chicago, Illinois. There's many campuses now throughout the country. And from there, we decided to relocate to Iowa from Chicago. And I was fortunate enough to find this opening where I find myself now, which I'm sure we'll talk more about later. But the short version is this beautiful connection between my previous experiences and my interests of psychology, law, clinical practice, research, program development, and policy development. And it all kind of comes together. So I think I found at this, I'd say, early mid-career stage of my professional career, at a really sweet spot, particularly to be able to work with the likes of Susan and Talana, and help support them doing their work that they do at their facilities.
Yeah, thank you. That's just one thing I have learned with this area is there's so many avenues, right? So thank you for sharing that. And Susan, what about you?
Well, I tell you what, I feel like I kind of stumbled into it. I'm an Iowa native and it was a farm wife, and we experienced, my husband and I experienced that autism in our children. So I knew I needed to do something. And that was almost 30 years ago. There wasn't a lot of resources then for families, especially in rural areas. So we hired behavior analysts to come from the West Coast and do consultations. We went in with 2 other families in Iowa and had them come in and spend about 2 weeks in Iowa, split their time up. And we could just see that wasn't really sustainable for several reasons over the long haul. So one of us needed to kind of understand what to do and how to lead that team our own. So I actually went to DMACC in Carroll and acquired an associate degree there. And from there went to Drake and got the bachelor's degree in psychology, and then did my master's degree in mental health while I was simultaneously taking some behavior analysis courses from the University of North Texas online. So it all just kind of came together. And I don't know that it's something that I would have done if we had not experienced the autism, but in some ways I feel like that was both the worst and the best thing that happened to us, because it has certainly, made us more aware of many things that we weren't aware of before. And it's been a wonderful career to have.
Yes. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
Talana, what about you?
I actually started out with getting my bachelor's in criminal justice and thought I wanted to go into become a juvenile court officer. So that was my long-term goal, was to be a JCO, and then worked in some, it wasn't like, it was at Fort Des Moines. So it was work release stuff, and realized like within a couple months I think they told me I was too social worky for that kind of environment. So I agreed with them and went on to get my master's in psychology with emphasis in addiction, which I'd always been interested in, and then continued on as I did behavioral health intervention in home. I realized I wanted to be a therapist, and continued on to get my master's in clinical mental health counseling. So that, and now it's just kind of ironic that criminal justice degree has come in handy when I took this position, because it's all intertwined, I guess. So it's worked out well.
Yeah. Okay, I'll just kind of transition. I'll kind of skip a couple questions. And since we're kind of talking about careers, and you'll probably laugh at this question because I know in your field that no day is the same, but can you just kind of talk about a day-to-day for you? Like, what does that look like for you? And again, I know that there's probably no day that's the same, and that's probably something you enjoy about your job. But if you could just kind of talk about a little bit about what you do day-to-day every day. Derek, we'll start with you.
Sure. You nailed it. Every day is different. And that is one thing I enjoy most about clinical and forensic psychology work. My current role as clinical director involves a variety of different tasks. So it'll often involve some clinical consultation. So some meetings with clinicians who are at our facilities doing the on the ground, in the trenches type work. We may discuss challenging cases, or I may consult on aspects of risk or harm, or just complex clinical presentations. Lately, I've been doing a lot of program development and policy development work. So at several of our facilities, we're doing deep dives into how we do things and looking for areas that we can make improvement on. And so in order to help support our folks at our facilities, us at central office kind of take on some of that higher level program development and policy development work to provide the framework to the actual like interventions and services we want to provide, and make sure that those align with evidence-based practice and current science and data. It involves some administrative tasks as well. I don't have any supervisory or managerial responsibilities, but again, are involved in meeting facilitation, some note-taking, coordination, kind of does ultimately funnels into that program development and policy development work for the most part. And a lot of my work does involve team-based work. I think we work, especially at DHS, as a department, but also as our facilities as part of interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary teams. So there's often a lot of people around the table to bring a lot of different unique perspectives for how they see an issue. And so I'm often involved in either attending those meetings, facilitating those meetings, and kind of helping the whole group sort of keep moving us forward. And again, for me, I'm not someone who really enjoys the same type of thing every day. I prefer not to eat the same meals every day, those sorts of things as well. So the variability is a big piece of something I've always looked for in my jobs, and something that's just been confirmed and supported as I've gone on over the years.
Yeah, great. Susan, what about you?
Well, it wouldn't always happen this way, but I think for the sake of this, I would explain that if I'm going to change a behavior, first I need to learn about it. So I would talk to maybe the individual or their family or staff, make observations, try to define what it is and get an idea of how often it's happening. Then I'd write a behavior support plan, and I'd get people trained who are going to run it, whether that be family members or staff. And then we'd take data, and wouldn't necessarily have that data the same day, but eventually I need to look at that data then and kind of review what's happening. Is the intervention that we designed making a difference in the direction that we want it to go? Are things getting better or worse? And I would tweak the plan according-wise, and we would just keep doing that over and over until the behavior was no longer of concern, of social significance. Of course, there's a lot of other little things in between there, but that's the gist of it: is the observation, design the plan, train, implement, and then look at data and tweak as needed.
Yes. When I had the pleasure of hosting our instructors at DMAC, one of our behavioral analysts had us watch a video and then kind of have us monitor what we're seeing. And it's so funny, like just sitting back and watching that, like how much you can discover. So yes, thank you. Talana, what about you? What does your day-to-day look like?
That's a hard question.
Yeah.
It's never the same. And that is exactly what I like about it. I am doing some of the things that Dr. Hess mentioned as far as like policy stuff, and the mental health director, but treatment program administrator here as well. So I do a lot of that admin kind of work, but I'm very hands-on the ground kind of person. So I typically, so I house myself down in the school where the students are with my department, and I like the interaction with students. I like to run groups, and I just like to be involved in the trenches, if you will. So yeah, a lot of hands-on, but then writing, and really just depends on the day. It is always different. So that's the good thing.
Yeah. So now I'm gonna kind of ask you a question that was asked in a previous session. We had a lot of students that were interested in this career field, and they kind of wanted to know how you all kind of the work-life balance, the stuff that you do, you're taking on other people's stuff is what our professor kind of called it. And just how do you manage that, right? I mean, some of the stuff that you see is difficult. And so how do you, when you leave work for the day, be able to kind of manage that?
It's a great question. I think it's something we as professionals are constantly, I don't want to say struggling with, but constantly evaluating, reevaluating, and adjusting. I've always, looked at work-life balance as I don't know if there's ever a balance in terms of an equilibrium. And I think it's also important for budding professionals to know that it will change as your life circumstances change. And so this idea of just having this static or consistent balance in terms of the number of hours I put in at work versus at home is going to change, at least for I think many folks. And so I think that's important to appreciate. And to, recognize that we're all different. We're all human. We all have different circumstances, different interests, different strengths, and different growth edges. And so factoring all of those in to be able to, I guess, most effectively manage those multiple responsibilities we have. So it's a challenge. For me, I think it's things like having values and priorities. I am very dedicated to my work. I believe that things shouldn't pass my desk if they're not meeting my standards or expectations. So that often requires additional time, effort, energy, and often more than 40 hours a week. Yet I also believe that for my, as someone who has 2 young children and a family, that's very important. And so I have responsibilities to them. I have responsibilities to myself as an individual, and responsibilities to the state and the Department of Human Services from that work component. So finding ways, again, to balance those by setting deadlines on time, so some nights I'm not going to work past 5 o'clock. Other times, if there's a deadline, I might be able to borrow a little bit on the weekends or evenings to make sure that those responsibilities are met. In terms of not bringing it home, I think that is also very individualized and unique. And I think we have to go through our own explorations to get there. Something that's helped me is, just I think understanding my role and my responsibilities in this work. And as a clinical and forensic psychologist, I am not often the ultimate decision maker. That's often a legal professional, such as a judge. And so, if I'm doing a forensic evaluation, for instance, I, do my work similar to Susan talked about. It's a lot about gathering that data, gathering that information, and then putting all those pieces together, writing it up in a report that's very clear, and then being able to sort of back away and be like, okay, I'm going to advocate for my opinion, but I'm not going to advocate for the outcome, because the outcome's outside of my control. And I can't control that. So I'm going to focus on the best I can on the things I can control, do my best and try to, then let that go. But I think, again, that they focus a lot of that on training. So I think folks that are concerned about this, recognize it's often a big focus of graduate school education, whether it's in psychology or counseling or behavioral analysis. And I think it's something that also just evolves over time.
Yeah. Just to add to that, when I was in that presentation, another student said something on the lines of, I'm a very emotional person. And so, if I'm in this role and I'm emotional with the client that I'm trying to help and that type of thing. And that is one thing that training, is very important, and that you guys work through all of that. And so I think some of the fears that the younger students are having, like you said, Dr. Hess, that, it does come with experience, and it comes with the training and education too as well. So thank you for touching on that. Susan, you mentioned maybe you were going to take a run later. Is that one way that you escape your practice, or what are some other things?
It can be. I think I try to practice what I preach. So I like, different therapy models, for instance, acceptance and commitment therapy. And I kind of use that on myself when I notice that I'm, ruminating or thinking about what happened at work or something I need to get done or so forth. Then I start noticing, what antecedents preceded those thoughts, and actually apply behavior analysis to myself and ask myself, is it effective to do this? Because whether I think about that or the new recipe I'm making for supper or what I'm seeing on my run, it's not going to change anything. It's all up here. So I try to actually apply the same things. And I think to some extent that kind of helps me understand what some of the people that I support are going through, because I've lived that, and I can, offer ideas and also have an understanding of what they go through, how those thoughts kind of sometimes just come back and pop into our heads, even though, we want to think about something else. So I try to use that.
Yes. Awesome. Talana, what about you?
Really hard going last because they keep nailing everything I'm going to say, but I think it's a hard balance, but it's a doable balance. And a lot of it for me has been like letting the guilt go, letting myself just for practicing what you preach, because I say that to people and not holding themselves, not being so hard on themselves, I guess, and starting to do that for myself more, and making sure that, like, if I have to put in extra hours this week, that's okay. And next week I'm going to put in extra hours with my kids, or you know, vice versa, the balance of that. And then the extra, just self-care is really important, and yoga, mindfulness, things like that. Again, practicing what you preach and then doing it as well has been really helpful. And the comment about a previous student, that I think it is scary, like, you know, I'm emotional too, so it's scary thinking, is it going to be hard to let it go? But one of the things I've always continued to tell myself is, yes, it is. It's going to be hard for anybody doing it, but if we don't, who will? And I think it's better than nobody doing it. So I just wanted to throw that in there. That's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that everybody was saying is they appreciate, you know, when people are being real with them and showing that they care. So thank you for touching on that. Okay. Can you guys, I know you probably look for little wins throughout the day, but do you have like a biggest win that you have in your career this far that you would like to share, or a quick story that you have that really just touched you as a professional in this industry?
It's a great question. My biggest win, maybe I'm too present focused at the moment, but my biggest win is exactly where I am right now, here in Iowa and in this role. I think that, kind of touching on the first question, for me, it's sort of come full circle. And this is I've always been looking for ways that I can fulfill my, sort of diverse interests, like psychology and law, for instance, clinical work and policy and research. And this job allows me to dabble and play in all of those spaces at different times. And so for me, that I have this great sense of satisfaction, of ease, and joy of being able to do that work, and also being able to do it with such phenomenal people like Susan and Talana, and throughout DHS. It's a strong commitment to helping others, serving others, but that public service component is strong throughout our department. And so with that, I think there are, other, again, little wins every day, right? In the work that we are all involved in, there are many challenges, many things, again, that are outside of our control in many cases. And so you have to look for those daily opportunities of a successful clinical outcome, or meeting a successful deadline, or having a project go well. But for me, I would answer this question differently if you asked it at different points in time. And I think that just goes to developmentally, from like a developmental approach, where you're at, the wins, kind of keep changing and in that way. So
yeah, absolutely. Susan?
Well, there's been day-to-day things like helping family, doing consultations for families, and realizing that maybe the consultations help them toilet train their child. I mean, that makes a big difference for someone with an intellectual disability, whether or not they are toilet trained. It has long-term outcomes. Also, like with initiating speech, because that is so associated with long-term outcomes. So various things like that. But I think overall, probably one of the biggest wins I've had is, because some of the people that I work with are behavior analysts and some people are not, is that collectively we can kind of help expose them to the idea that the behaviors that society have typically called mental health and kind of treated them differently are really just behaviors, and they are candidates for behavior analytic treatment as well. And it's kind of a different way of thinking about it, and it opens up a lot of doors for people who typically thought that that wasn't a good match for behavior analysis. So that's been real exciting through the years to watch that unfold.
Yeah, thank you. Talana?
Again, similar to Dr. Hess, I feel like right now is a really, it's kind of the perfect position and the biggest win in the present and the current, because we're going through so much and we're making so many changes that every single day I feel like we've won little battles. And I know, I don't think it's the biggest win I've had yet, because I feel like when it all comes together, what we're working toward, that will be the biggest win. But the idea of the bigger goal in mind and the purpose, and there's certain things that stand out that I could share, but I don't want to talk too much. So I think every day getting through the little things is what's building to be the biggest accomplishment. So
absolutely. Well, I want to be respectful of time, so I'm going to give one last question, and just kind of a farewell question. So for students that are watching this, what piece of advice would you give them? Wanting to go into this pathway and this field, what advice would you give them, being kind of younger? Is there anything that they could be doing that would set them up that you wish maybe you would have done? But any last piece of advice to have them kind of take with them after they're done watching this?
I would explore and seize as many opportunities academically or training wise as you can. Again, for me, I knew I was interested in certain things, but it wasn't until I, did a voluntary internship or took a course on it, or just, had long conversations with a professional who did this work that I was able to solidify what I liked and didn't like. I thought coming out of graduate school, I did a forensic psychology postdoc in Massachusetts. I thought I would stay there and do just direct 100% clinical work. And I realized that wasn't quite what I wanted. I want a little more, diversity in my day-to-day job. So I think if you're interested in a course, take it. If you think you might be interested in working with a certain population, try to get some experience or exposure with that population. And I think that real life experience is one of the best ways to help clarify it for many folks. And as Susan referenced, if you're interested in things like science and data and putting puzzles together and solving problems, clinical psychology may be for you, forensic psychology may be for you, behavior analysis may be for you, mental health counseling may be for you. So all those different human services and mental health or behavioral health disciplines and specialties touch on each other, but they are nuanced and different in different ways. So I think that's, if you're in this space and listening to this presentation, just start kind of going down these different paths or reaching out to cold calling, cold emailing people is tremendously effective. I think especially in places like Iowa, you'll be very surprised, I hope, at how responsive people are to those outreaches. So that can be really elucidating as well.
Yes, great advice. Susan, do you have any advice for them?
Well, I do. I believe DMACC has an Introduction to Behavior Modification course, and I've heard good things about it and good things about the instructor. So for DMACC students, that might be something to check out. And similar to what Derek said, consider reaching out to the Iowa Association of Behavior Analysis. They do have a webpage. Their board meetings are open to the public, like via Zoom, or they could go in person. But there's opportunities there to meet people and to find out about opportunities to shadow or maybe internships or whatever it might be. But start understanding what's going on in Iowa in behavior analysis, and that's a never-ending list of ways to find out what's currently going on. So that's what I'd suggest.
Great. Talana, any last advice for the students?
Yeah, I was just jotting some notes so I didn't forget. I would say something, we all know that education is important, it absolutely is, and it's a requirement. I also think that experience is really important in getting your foot in the door and trying different things, because that will build upon your path and where you end up. And speaking of path, just enjoying, looking back, I would have never known I would be here, and things got really hard at certain points, but just enjoying that current path, and that it will lead to, it'll all come together eventually. And things, the field has come so far since I started in residential at 19 years old that I would have never thought we're able to do some of the things we are today, 15 years ago or whatever. So it's interesting to see everything transpire. And I guess my final thought would be really encourage people not to give up, because it can get discouraging sometimes. You do deal with really emotional situations depending on what type of work, and I was an outpatient counselor for many years prior to this, so you can get really involved with people's lives, and it's not always a happy ending, but that's what people face every day. And I think if we can show our clients or population we work with that we are willing to continue to do it and fight the good fight, I guess that gives them even more encouragement. So just don't give up, keep going. And there's something for everyone in the field of people, I think. So
yes. Well, thank you for that last piece. I after I've been kind of involved with you all as professionals, we like to call you guys the real life superheroes. And so thank you not only for being here today, but for all that you do. You guys are so logical, and your answers, I could just talk to you all day. So thank you again for your time today. And I hope that we cross paths in the future, but thank you again for being here. And thank you, students who are viewing this as well. So everybody have a great day.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.